Most people recognize Corey Harrison as a loyal grandson who grew up surrounded by the sights and sounds of the gold and silver pawn shop, a place that would eventually become a household name thanks to the reality TV show Pawn Stars. Corey's childhood was not typical. Born on April 27, 1983, to Rick Harrison and Kim Harrison, Corey entered the world just a few blocks away from the small pawn shop that would later shape almost every aspect of his life. From a very young age, he was immersed in the rhythm of the shop. While most children spent their days playing outside or attending school activities, Corey was learning the ins and outs of a business that involved negotiating prices, authenticating valuable items, and understanding the delicate balance between trust and commerce. His grandfather, Richard Harrison, known affectionately as the Old Man, and his grandmother, Matilda, had opened the gold and silver pawn shop in 1988 with a simple 50-50 partnership. There were no outside investors, no complicated ownership arrangements, and no elaborate legal plans for future. For young Corey, the shop was a playground and a classroom combined. He would toddle past shelves stacked with gold coins, rare guitars, jewelry, and artifacts brought in by people hoping to strike a deal or recover some lost fortune. By the age of 9, Corey was helping with small tasks like organizing inventory or learning how to examine items for authenticity. He absorbed this knowledge like a sponge, learning by observing his grandfather and father handle negotiations and business operations. Unlike many kids who drift away from their family businesses during adolescence, Corey stayed involved. He dedicated himself to understanding every aspect of the shop, from counting cash to recognizing the value of antiques and collectibles. He worked long hours, often alongside older employees who had been with the business for decades, earning their respect by demonstrating knowledge, reliability, and maturity far beyond his years. While most children were figuring out school homework, Corey was learning how to negotiate with strangers, handle high-pressure situations, and take on responsibilities that most adults would find challenging. This early exposure to the business world shaped Corey's character. It instilled in him a strong work ethic, an ability to read people quickly, and a loyalty to his family and the shop that would define his life. Little did he know, however, that while he devoted himself entirely to the family business, the legal and structural foundations of the shop had already begun to shape a future that would not include him as an owner. Decisions made decades before he was even old enough to understand what ownership meant would quietly influence the trajectory of his life. Corey's story began with innocence and hard work, but also began with the reality that dedication alone does not always guarantee control or recognition in family-run enterprises. Even though he grew up inside the shop and became a central figure in its operations, the legal documents and ownership arrangements created long before he was born quietly excluded him from ever holding a formal stake in the business. This early foundation, combined with the lessons of loyalty, work ethic, and understanding the value of both objects and relationships, would later clash with the hard realities of business law, inheritance, and family dynamics, setting the stage for the story of a man who gave his life to a shop he could love, but never legally OW. As Corey Harrison moved from childhood into his teenage years, his involvement in the gold and silver pawn shop grew deeper, more demanding, and increasingly central to the daily operations of the business. Unlike most teenagers who are exploring hobbies, social circles, and the freedom that comes with adolescence, Corey's world revolved around the pawn shop. He spent countless hours managing inventory, assisting customers, and learning to negotiate deals for a wide variety of items, from jewelry and coins to rare memorabilia and vintage instruments. Each day, he absorbed the subtle lessons that come only from practical experience, learning not just the technical aspects of valuing and authenticating goods, but also the interpersonal skills necessary to handle customers from all walks of life. Corey's father, Rick Harrison, and his grandfather, Richard the Old Man Harrison, began to rely on him for tasks that required judgment, responsibility, and a keen understanding of both business and human behavior. By his teenage years, Corey had effectively become the operational backbone of the shop. He wasn't just observing anymore. He was executing, making decisions, and ensuring the business ran smoothly even in the absence of his elders. Yet, while his skills, reliability, and dedication grew, the legal and ownership structure of the business remained unchanged, frozen in time as it had been when the shop was founded in 1988. The partnership between the Old Man and Matilda was simple on paper, but it did not account for the next generation. Corey's devotion and hard work earned him respect and trust, but it did not translate into a stake in the company. This reality was something Corey did not fully grasp during his teenage years. Like many young people, he assumed that loyalty, competence, and dedication would naturally lead to recognition and eventually ownership. He watched his father and grandfather navigate decisions, close major deals, and expand the business into new opportunities, assuming that his contributions were building a path toward eventual partnership. As Pawn Stars began filming and the shop caught the attention of television producers, Corey's responsibilities expanded even further. By his late teens, he was handling high-pressure negotiations and managing staff, all while maintaining the operations necessary to keep the shop running smoothly. Despite the pressures and the long hours, he remained committed, driven by a combination of family loyalty, passion for the business, and a unique opportunity to grow within an enterprise that was already beginning to attract national attention. Yet, amid these responsibilities, Corey was beginning to notice the invisible boundaries that separated him from true ownership. He observed the legal paperwork, the way decisions were formally made, and the structure of the partnership between his grandfather and grandmother, and slowly began to understand that hard work alone could not override the documents and legal agreements that governed the shop. This realization, though subtle at first, planted the seeds of awareness that would later grow into a more profound understanding of the limitations he faced. Corey's teenage years were, therefore, a period of both growth and awakening, a time when he mastered the operations of a complex, highly visible business, while simultaneously learning the uncomfortable truth that dedication and loyalty did not automatically confer legal rights or formal authority. This dual reality shaped his character, instilling both a strong sense of responsibility and a cautious understanding of the importance of legal frameworks, preparing him for the challenges, disappointments, and complex family dynamics that would dominate the next chapters of his life. By the time he reached adulthood, Corey was not just a trusted employee or a supportive grandson. He had become a central figure in the shop, someone indispensable to its success, yet also someone whose future ownership remained uncertain due to decisions made decades before he even understood what equity or inheritance truly meant. These teenage years, filled with lessons in both business acumen and the limitations imposed by law, laid the groundwork for the story of a man whose dedication and skill would never be formally rewarded with ownership. Despite being at the heart of the enterprise that would eventually capture the attention of millions worldwide, as Corey Harrison grew into adulthood, he began to understand a reality that was both invisible and unforgiving. The legal structure of the gold and silver pawn shop, established decades earlier, would prevent him from ever claiming ownership. When the shop was founded in 1988, Richard the Old Man Harrison and his wife, Matilda, set up a straightforward 50-50 partnership, a structure that seemed simple at the time and suitable for a small, family-run business. There were no outside investors, no complex corporate arrangements, and no detailed provisions for the next generation of the family. On paper, the shop was equally divided between the two founders, but it lacked the foresight to account for children or grandchildren who would devote their lives to the business. For years, Corey operated under the assumption that his loyalty, dedication, and hands-on experience would naturally lead to some form of ownership, even if it were gradual or symbolic. He worked tirelessly, learned every aspect of the business, and took on responsibilities that extended far beyond what most employees or even family members would be expected to handle. Yet, the legal reality was that ownership was determined strictly by documents and statutes, not by effort or emotional investment. When Matilda Harrison passed away, she left no specific while detailing the future of her 50% stake. According to Nevada intestacy law, her share legally defaulted to her surviving spouse, the old man, automatically consolidating full control in his hands. Corey, despite his decades of loyalty, was excluded by law from inheriting anything from her estate. This was not due to negligence or malice on the part of the family, but simply the result of long-standing legal structures that had never been revisited or updated to reflect the contributions of the next generation. As Pawn Stars began filming in 2009 and brought the shop global attention, Corey's role in the business became more public, more visible, and more critical to the daily functioning of the enterprise. Fans saw him laughing, negotiating deals, and handling high-value items with expertise, but the cameras could not show the legal limitations quietly shaping his future. Despite being the operational backbone, managing staff, supervising deals, and even handling emergency situations, Corey's contributions remained separate from formal ownership. As he matured, he realized that even attempts to negotiate a stake would be complicated by additional layers of legal, financial, and regulatory challenges. Nevada pawn licensing laws require that any new equity partner undergo background checks, financial audits, and compliance reviews, meaning that adding even a small percentage to Corey would trigger months of bureaucracy and potentially significant costs. Additionally, transferring ownership in a business tied to a television show would involve rewriting contracts with the History Channel, renegotiating licensing deals, and coordinating with vendors, lenders, and city regulators, creating a maze of obstacles that far exceeded simple familial goodwill. On top of that, any shares given to Corey could be treated as a taxable gift, resulting in substantial IRS scrutiny and potential fines. All of these factors created a legal wall that Corey could never climb, no matter how dedicated he was or how many years he spent at the counter. The more he learned, the clearer it became that the shop's ownership was not determined by loyalty, knowledge, or hard work, but by a combination of historical decisions, legal frameworks, and regulatory structures that had been in place long before he even understood what equity meant. Corey's devotion, skill, and leadership would never translate into a legal claim. He was, in essence, a partner in practice but not in law, a situation that would define the next phase of his life, shaping both his relationship with his family and his understanding of what it meant to truly belong to something he had helped build. This legal reality created a tension between emotional investment and formal recognition, a tension that would follow him through years of public success, private frustration, and personal challenges, revealing a story where dedication and ownership were not synonymous, and where love for a family enterprise could exist without legal entitlement as Corey Harrison transitioned fully into adulthood. His role in the gold and silver pawn shop expanded beyond the confines of a traditional employee. With the debut of Pawn Stars in 2009, the small Las Vegas pawn shop suddenly became a global phenomenon, drawing millions of viewers to witness the day-to-day operations of the Harrison family business. For Corey, this exposure was both exhilarating and complicated. On one hand, he found himself thrust into the public eye, recognized not only for his loyalty and hard work, but also for his charisma, professionalism, and ability to handle high-stakes deals with confidence and precision. Fans saw him negotiating the purchase of rare items, authenticating valuable collectibles, and engaging in light-hearted banter with customers and family members. These moments, captured by cameras, portrayed Corey as a reliable, dependable figure who kept the shop running smoothly and ensured that every transaction, whether for a gold coin, antique firearm, or celebrity memorabilia, was conducted with care and integrity. On the other hand, while the world applauded his visible contributions, Corey remained painfully aware of the invisible boundary separating him from true ownership. Despite managing operations, overseeing employees, and often taking on responsibilities equal to or greater than those of his father and grandfather, the legal documents governing the shop's partnership remained unchanged. The 50-50 ownership structure that had existed since 1988 was still in place, meaning Corey's role, no matter how central, did not translate into a legal claim. He began to realize that public recognition and financial rewards tied to the show, such as royalties, bonuses, and the prestige of being a television personality, were separate from the formal rights and responsibilities of ownership. This created a tension that would define much of Corey's professional life. He was essential to the business, yet excluded from the very foundation that determined ultimate control. As the show gained popularity, Corey's responsibilities multiplied. He was managing day-to-day operations, supervising a growing team of employees, and navigating the unique challenges of running a business now under intense public scrutiny. The fame brought by the show did not lessen his workload. If anything, it amplified it. Each deal became more complex, every transaction more visible, and every decision carried a weight of both financial consequence and public perception. Despite his increased visibility and contributions, the legal wall remained. Attempts to negotiate a stake in the company, whether through conversation with his father and grandfather or informal agreements, were met with the reality that altering the ownership structure was neither simple nor financially prudent. The regulatory, contractual, and tax implications of adding Corey as a formal owner were significant, requiring months of additional paperwork, potential legal disputes, and risk to the business's licensing. Moreover, any move to grant him ownership would have required rewriting contracts with the History Channel, renegotiating intellectual property rights, and coordinating with lenders, vendors, and local authorities. These obstacles created an environment where Corey could contribute as much as anyone, yet never be legally recognized as a partner. The contrast between fame and formal exclusion became even more pronounced as Corey navigated personal and professional growth within this public platform. While viewers cheered for his negotiating skills and charismatic presence, Corey had to reconcile the pride he felt in his work with the quiet frustration of knowing that his contributions, dedication, and even the risks he took on behalf of the business did not translate into legal ownership. The irony of a situation, being publicly indispensable while privately powerless in the eyes of the law, would shape his understanding of value, loyalty, and family relationships. Yet, rather than allowing this reality to embitter him, Corey continued to dedicate himself fully to the shop, driven by a sense of duty, love for the business, and respect for the family legacy. His rise on Pawn Stars was therefore not just a story of professional achievement or television fame. It was also a story of navigating the delicate balance between recognition and exclusion, between visible success and invisible limitations, and between personal pride and legal realities. This period in Corey's life exemplified both the rewards and the complexities of working in a family business that had been thrust into global prominence while simultaneously demonstrating how hard work, charisma, and public acclaim could never fully replace formal, legal ownership in shaping the trajectory of his career and life. In June 2018, Corey Harrison faced a pivotal moment that would alter the trajectory of his life and bring the realities of ownership and legacy into stark focus. Richard the Old Man Harrison, the patriarch of the family and co-founder of the gold and silver pawn shop, passed away at the age of 77 after a prolonged battle with Parkinson's disease. For Corey, this was more than a loss of a grandfather. It was a loss of a mentor, a guide, and a daily collaborator who had shaped his understanding of business, ethics, and family responsibility. The old man had been a constant presence, working shoulder to shoulder with Corey for years, imparting lessons about negotiation, valuing objects, and the subtleties of human behavior that no textbook could teach. Their relationship had been defined by a mix of discipline, humor, and mutual respect, and losing him created an emotional void in the shop that Corey could never fully fill. Yet, while the grief was immediate and profound, it was soon accompanied by another, more complicated realization. The old man's death triggered the activation of estate plans and legal mechanisms that would consolidate ownership of the pawn shop in ways Corey had not anticipated. Matilda Harrison, Richard's wife and Corey's grandmother, had passed away years earlier, leaving no detail that included Corey. According to Nevada intestacy law, her 50% stake reverted automatically to her surviving spouse, Richard Harrison, consolidating control in his hands. When the old man passed away, his entire estate, including the portion inherited from Matilda, legally went to Rick Harrison Jr., Corey's older brother, who had been formally prepared to manage the financial, legal, and strategic aspects of the business. Corey, despite decades of dedication, hard work, and intimate knowledge of the shop's operations, was left without any formal legal stake. The documents and laws governing the business were indifferent to loyalty, sweat equity, or personal sacrifice. They were determined strictly by statutes, contracts, and formal ownership structures. This moment marked the crystallization of a reality Corey had long sensed but had never fully confronted. No amount of effort or dedication could replace the legal rights that had been predetermined long before he was ready to assume them. The impact was both emotional and practical. While Corey continued to run day-to-day operations and remain deeply involved in the shop, he now faced the knowledge that the authority and control he exercised were conditional and subject to the legal decisions of ownership. The grief of losing the old man intertwined with the frustration of understanding that his years of service, mentorship, and loyalty would not translate into formal recognition he might have expected. The event also highlighted the broader complexity of family business succession, showing how the combination of historical decisions, incomplete estate planning, and legal statutes can create outcomes that diverge sharply from the expectations of those who dedicate their lives to the enterprise. On a personal level, Corey had to reconcile his sense of duty, love for the business, and respect for the family legacy with the stark legal reality of exclusion. He could continue to contribute, manage operations, and maintain the shop's public image, but the ultimate decision-making power and ownership now resided entirely with his brother. This duality, being indispensable yet legally powerless, would become a defining element of Corey's professional and emotional life. While he experienced pride in seeing the business continue successfully under family leadership, the moment also brought heartbreak, as decades of personal investment and sacrifice were not formally recognized in the way he might have imagined. The death of the old man, therefore, was both a personal tragedy and professional turning point, forcing Corey to confront the limitations imposed by law, the consequences of past decisions, and the nuanced realities of family dynamics in a high-profile business. It was a lesson in resilience, acceptance, and the understanding that influence and respect can exist independently of legal authority, though they cannot fully replace the recognition that formal ownership might have conferred. The emotional weight of this period would continue to shape Corey's approach to business, family, and his own aspirations, emphasizing the intricate balance between loyalty, dedication, and the sometimes unforgiving structures of law and inheritance. After the death of Richard the Old Man Harrison in 2018, Corey Harrison faced not only the emotional weight of losing a mentoring grandfather, but also a series of deeply personal challenges that tested his resilience, character, and dedication to the family business. While the public primarily saw him as a charismatic and reliable figure on Pawn Stars, the private reality of Corey's life during this period was filled with grief, disappointment, and moments of profound reflection. One of the most significant blows came in 2024 when Corey experienced the heartbreaking loss of his younger brother, Adam Harrison, who died at just 39 years old from a fentanyl overdose. This tragedy compounded the emotional strain that had begun with the old man's passing, plunging Corey into a period of mourning that affected not only his personal life, but also his capacity to navigate the high-pressure environment of the pawn shop and the global spotlight that Pawn Stars continue to generate. Family tragedies of this magnitude have a ripple effect. They influence emotional stability, focus, and the ability to make critical business decisions, especially in a family-owned enterprise where relationships are intertwined with operations. Amid this ongoing grief, Corey also encountered legal and reputational challenges of his own. In 2023, he faced a DUI arrest in Las Vegas, an incident that not only brought public scrutiny, but also created tension within the family at a time when emotional resources were already stretched thin. The arrest underscored the reality that fame and responsibility, particularly in a family business under constant public observation, can amplify personal missteps and their consequences. Despite these compounded pressures, loss, legal complications, and the public eye, Corey continued to show up at the shop, demonstrating an extraordinary level of commitment and resilience. He maintained his responsibilities, including supervising employees, managing day-to-day operations, overseeing inventory, and mentoring newer staff members. Even as he navigated the grief and personal challenges, Corey's dedication never wavered. In many ways, these experiences deepened his understanding of what it meant to contribute meaningfully to a business and a family legacy without the formal recognition of ownership. He continued to make decisions with authority and prudence, guided by the lessons learned from years spent working alongside his grandfather and father. In private conversations, Corey reflected on the fact that while he had been excluded from legal ownership, his influence, judgment, and operational expertise remained critical to the shop's success. The juxtaposition of personal hardship with professional responsibility reinforced a central theme in Corey's life: that influence and respect, earned through dedication and skill, can exist independently of formal legal claims, though the absence of ownership leaves an undeniable ache. Corey's perseverance in the face of personal tragedy also highlighted his character, revealing a man who, despite profound grief, did not retreat from his responsibilities or abandon the shop that had defined so much of his identity. He continued to engage with the staff, customers, and the broader public, maintaining the reputation and operational integrity of a business under the pressures of celebrity exposure and regulatory complexity. The compounded challenges, grief over family loss, public scrutiny following a legal incident, and the ongoing frustration of being excluded from ownership illustrated the dual realities Corey navigated daily: the pride and fulfillment of meaningful work, paired with the emotional weight of limitations imposed by circumstance and law. Yet through it all, Corey remained steadfast. His continued presence, leadership, and dedication served not only the business and his family, but also the loyal audience who had followed his journey on Pawn Stars for years. This period of Corey's life demonstrated that personal challenges and emotional adversity, while deeply impactful, do not necessarily define one's contributions or diminish the value of hard work and loyalty. Instead, they revealed the resilience required to maintain professionalism, uphold a family legacy, and continue building a meaningful role in a business that could never legally belong to him, further shaping the narrative of a man whose influence, while unofficial, became inseparable from the success and heart of the gold and silver pawn shop. Over time, Corey Harrison reached a point of quiet acceptance regarding his role in the gold and silver pawn shop, a role defined not by legal ownership, but by influence, leadership, and the enduring impact he had on the business and everyone within it. While many people might assume that the absence of a formal stake would diminish commitment or enthusiasm, Corey's experience demonstrated the opposite. He recognized that ownership, though important, was not the sole measure of value or contribution. Instead, his authority came through experience, trust, and the respect he had earned from employees, customers, and family alike. Corey's influence in the shop extended across every aspect of operations. He chaired inventory meetings, evaluated high-value acquisitions, oversaw staff, and mentored new employees, ensuring that the quality, efficiency, and integrity of the business remained consistent even amid the pressures of fame and public scrutiny. His judgment often guided major decisions, and his presence was integral to maintaining the culture and operational